Most people don't realize this until it's too late. Their entire garden depends on things that can fail overnight. One heat wave, one cold snap, 1 week of missed watering, and suddenly everything you planted starts collapsing. Leaves burn, growth stops, harvest disappears, and all that time, all that effort, gone in a matter of days. The truth is, most gardens are built to succeed only when conditions are perfect. But real life doesn't work like that. Weather shifts, soil dries out, schedules get busy. Sometimes you just can't keep up, and that's exactly where most gardens break. But here's something almost nobody talks about. There are crops that don't care when things go wrong. Crops that keep growing even when the rest of your garden starts failing. Not because they're lucky, but because they're built differently. Their roots go deeper. Their structure is stronger. Their growth doesn't depend on constant attention. They don't panic when conditions change. They adapt. And once you understand this, you stop building fragile gardens. You start building resilient ones. Now, before we go deeper into this, do one thing real quick. Hit that like button and subscribe to PermaYield, because this channel is all about growing food in ways that actually survive real-world conditions, not just perfect ones. Because once you understand how these crops work, you'll never look at your garden the same way again. Most people are planting things that demand constant care. Water me every day. Protect me from heat. Replant me every season. It's like managing a system that's always on the edge of failing. But perennial crops don't work like that. They're not trying to survive one season. They're built to survive years, and that changes everything. Instead of shallow roots that dry out fast, they push deeper into the soil, finding moisture even when the surface looks completely dry. Instead of collapsing under stress, they slow down, hold energy, and bounce back. Instead of needing perfect timing, they adjust to what's happening around them. And this is the part most gardeners miss. When your annual crops fail, they're done. But when perennial crops struggle, they don't die. They wait, they recover, they come back stronger. That's the difference between a temporary plant and a permanent system. And once you have even a few of these in your garden, something shifts. You're no longer depending on everything going right. You've got backup built into the system, food that shows up, even when things don't go as planned. And honestly, that's what most people are really looking for. Not just a garden that looks good when everything is perfect, but a garden that still feeds you when things go wrong. Because sooner or later, something always does. And when it does, the only question is, did you plant for perfection, or did you plant for survival? There's a moment every gardener remembers, when something goes wrong, and you walk outside hoping it's not as bad as you think, but it is. The leaves are hanging, the soil is cracked. What looked alive just days ago now looks like it's already given up. And the frustrating part is, you did everything right. You watered, you planted on time, you followed the advice. Still, it failed. Now, here's what most people don't notice in that same moment. Right next to those struggling plants, there are always a few that look completely fine, not perfect, but alive, still holding color, still pushing growth, still standing. Those are the plants that tell you everything you need to know, because they're not surviving by accident. They're surviving because of how they're built. Take something like perennial greens, for example. While most leafy vegetables burn out quickly under stress, these ones behave differently. Their roots go deeper than you expect, reaching moisture that never fully disappears. Their leaves might slow down, but they don't collapse. They adjust. And that adjustment is what keeps them alive when everything else fails. Then you've got root-based perennials. These are on another level. Even if the top of the plant looks weak, underground, it's still strong. It's holding nutrients, holding water, holding energy. So when conditions improve, even slightly, it doesn't need to restart. It just continues. That's something annual crops can't do. Once they fail, they're done. But they're patient, and patience in a garden is power. There are also crops that spread slowly over time. At first, they don't look impressive, small, quiet, almost invisible. But give them a season or two, and suddenly they start filling space, creating their own little system, covering soil, protecting moisture, reducing stress on themselves. And this is where things get interesting, because now the plant isn't just surviving bad conditions, it's changing the environment around it, making the soil better, holding water longer, creating shade, helping itself, without you needing to step in. That's when you realize something important. The strongest gardens aren't the ones you manage the most. They're the ones that start managing themselves. And once a few of these crops are established, your garden stops feeling fragile. Even when something fails, not everything fails. Even when conditions get rough, something is still producing, something is still growing, and that changes how you feel about the entire system. Less panic, less stress, more trust, because now you know your garden isn't depending on perfect conditions anymore. It has resilience built into it. So now the real question becomes, what kind of crops actually do this? What are these plants that keep producing even when everything else starts failing? And this is where things start to get very practical, because it's not just one type of plant. It's a pattern. Once you see it, you'll start recognizing these crops instantly. The first type are the deep-rooted survivors. These are plants that don't rely on surface water. While most of your garden is fighting over that top layer of moisture, these plants are already pulling water from deeper down. Even when the soil looks dry, they're still feeding themselves. That's why during heat or drought, they don't react the same way. They don't panic. They just keep going. Then you've got the comeback growers. These are the plants that look like they've failed but haven't. Cold hits, they disappear. Heat stress, they slow down. But the moment conditions improve, even slightly, they bounce right back. No replanting, no starting over. They were never gone. They were just waiting. And this is something most people completely misunderstand. They think the plant is dead, so they remove it, when in reality, it was about to come back stronger. Then there are the self-spreaders. These are the quiet builders in your garden. They don't explode with growth overnight. Instead, they slowly expand. One plant becomes 2, then 4, then a whole patch, and over time they create their own protection system, covering the soil, reducing evaporation, stabilizing temperature. So even when conditions get harsh, they've already built a buffer. And here's where it all connects. These plants aren't just surviving bad conditions. They're designed for inconsistency. They expect things to go wrong, and because of that, they don't collapse when it happens. Now compare that to most annual crops. They're built for speed, fast growth, fast harvest, fast results. But that speed comes at a cost. Shallow roots, high dependency, low resilience, which means when something goes off track, they don't have a backup system. They fail. That's why a garden full of only fast-growing crops feels risky. Everything looks great, until it doesn't. But when you mix in even a few of these resilient perennials, something powerful happens. You create layers. Some crops grow fast. Some crops last long. Some crops produce quickly. Others produce consistently. So no matter what happens, something is always working. And that's the real goal. Not perfection, but continuity. Because when your garden has continuity, failure stops being a disaster. It just becomes part of the cycle. At some point, you stop chasing perfect harvests and start building something that keeps going no matter what. Because once you've seen the difference, it's hard to ignore. You've seen what happens when everything depends on perfect timing. And you've seen what happens when even a few strong plants hold everything together. That contrast changes how you think. You stop asking, what grows the fastest? And start asking, what survives the longest? Because speed feels good in the beginning, but survival is what feeds you in the long run. And the truth is, most people never build that kind of garden. They stay stuck in the same cycle. Plant, hope, lose, repeat. Every season feels like starting from zero again. But when you bring in crops that don't disappear, when things go wrong, you break that cycle. Now your garden has memory. It has roots that go deeper every year. Plants that understand your soil better than you do. Systems that improve over time without needing constant fixing. And that's when something shifts inside you. You stop worrying as much. You stop checking every single day, hoping nothing has gone wrong. Because even if something does, you already know not everything will fail. There's always something still growing, something still producing, something still holding on. And that feeling is what most gardeners are actually chasing. Not just food, but stability. Because a garden that only works when everything is perfect isn't really a reliable system. But a garden that still feeds you when things go wrong, that's something different. That's something you can trust. And once you build that, you don't go back. So now I want to hear from you. What's the one problem that keeps ruining your garden every year? Heat, cold, pests, lack of time. Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who keeps losing their crops every season, share this with them. Because this might be the shift they've been missing. This is what we focus on here at PermaYield, building gardens that don't collapse when life gets unpredictable.